All right. Thank you for coming. This is So You Got Yourself an InfoSec Manager Job. Now what? I am John Woods. I have letters behind my name. I'm on the internet. I work for a company called NovaCoast as a security consultant. Feel free to talk to me about what I do, what my company does, or anything else security or Banjo related after the talk or online. Before I joined NovaCoast, I ran a security engineer team for 5 years. It was 8 people for a company with over 10,000 people in it. So what I'm giving you in this talk is going to be personal life experience. It's all real. It's not theoretical. It's not based on things I've heard or books I've read. All right? This is the outline. The keeping your job part is actually the most important, so stay awake during that part, or call your friends and tell them to come back and listen to that part, or skip ahead if you're watching online. All right. The first thing I want to talk about is whether you should say technical or not. If you work for a company and it's a small team, you have 1 or 2 people working for you, you're the lead engineer / manager, this really isn't a decision that you get to make. But if you work for a bigger company and you have a lot of people working for you, you're going to be very busy, and it's going to be very hard to spend the time to maintain those skills. And oftentimes your leadership will encourage you not to spend time maintaining those skills. And they'll try to pretend like you don't know how to delegate if you do maintain those skills. I think that's the wrong approach. I think they're giving you bad advice. That's a good idea for them if you lose those skills, but it's not good for you. Your job security in this role is much less than an engineering role, and there's much less of those jobs around. You might find yourself looking for a job someday, and if you didn't maintain your skills, and by maintain I mean keep current, the skills that got you the job in the first place, you might end up going from a senior engineer to a manager to a junior engineer, which is depressing. Don't let that happen to you. So it also makes you a better leader if you actually can do some of the things that your employees can do. So spend the time to keep your skills current, keep at least the skills that you brought to the job up to date throughout the course of having the job. You will be tempted not to, you will be very busy, but I highly recommend doing this. You'll regret it someday if you don't. All right, so assuming you're in this job, you took over from somebody who got fired or got promoted, or you're the first security manager in the company, and you inherited technology and people from other teams to make it. First thing you have to do is figure out what you have. This is the order of importance, I think, and we're going to talk about each of them in detail. People are your most important asset. So if everything else is bad and you have really good people, you can make everything else better. But the reverse is also true. So if you have great budget and mediocre people, eventually they'll get sick of giving you money and not getting anything in return for it. So focus on your people. The most important part of your people is how technical they are. You want to build a team with all super geeky engineers. And if you're encouraged to just kind of settle on employees, that's bad advice. That might be great advice for another team. You might be able to get away with some resources and some workhorses if you're a DBA team, but not a security team. So hold out, go after the really superstar technical engineers, which means you have to do a good job tech screening, which a lot of people screw up. So I'm going to talk about that for a little bit. First off, everyone uses the same questions that they get off the internet, and you might be using them and not know it because you picked it up from somebody else, where you just came to the natural conclusion this is a good question, because they are good questions. The problem is everyone uses these. All security engineers have been in 2 or more interviews to figure that out. They've Googled it, they read it. So Google security engineer interview questions. It's the second link typically. It's a great list of questions with good answers. And since so many people doing tech screenings out there don't know the answers to the questions, they use these because they're given the answers. So if you ask people, how does traceroute work? What's cross-site scripting? What's cross-site request forgery? Where do you get your security news from? Etc., etc. You don't know anything about that person yet because they just read the answers to those on the website. The other thing is phone screening. For a technical side, you're just testing how good they can use Wikipedia. So you have to do a good tech screen in person, and question answer tech screens, you're going to get tricked. You're going to get gamed occasionally. They just have to give you good stories that their coworker told them about in their last job. So, and very few people actually do anything more than that. So go one step further. If they're supposed to be able to, for example, review firewall rule changes and go, should I approve this or not? Hand them 5 or 6 pieces of paper that are firewall rule requests. Some are good and some are bad. Have them tell you which ones are good, which ones are bad, and why. If they can't do that, don't hire them. If they're supposed to have some offensive skills, they should be able to hack into a website and sit them in front of a computer with 2 VMs. One's got damn burnable web app, one's got backtrack. You should be able to knock 2 of these out in a few minutes and show me how to do it. If they can't do it, well, don't hire them to be your web penetration guy, right? So very few people do that. It doesn't take that much time and energy to set it up, to figure out what that is, especially if it's just print out paper, have them whiteboard an idea, have them explain things. Do more than just question and answer. Don't just accept their stories. Obviously look for people with different strengths. Don't hire all network security people and expect to be able to then just cross-train. Look for different kinds of skills. What those are going to be are going to depend on your environment, obviously. But 2 skills you should always have on a team like this, on a security engineer team that you're either part or completely responsible for an organization's IT security, is you need a good coder. By coding, I mean Ruby, Python, Perl. If you don't have that, build it or hire it. If you don't know why you need that, it's because you don't have it. So everything that you own most likely has some kind of API or some way in some automated fashion to interface with. And it's amazing how much stuff you can get to work way better and how much you can meet your business needs with the products you purchase or how already inherited if you have this skill. You really, really need this skill. You also need somebody that knows a little bit about offensive. Even if you're a defensive team, you make better decisions on where to focus, and it's really powerful to be able to demonstrate yourself. This is why this is a bad idea. This is what people can do with it. And even if you pay somebody else to do all your pen tests, and you do an annual pen test every year, you should be finding the easy stuff to get the value out of that pen test. If a pen tester shows up, does an Nmap scan, imports that into Metasploit, he does a freaking Hail Mary tech with Armitage and they own you, you failed. You should do that yourself. That's easy stuff. And if you don't have at least one person on your team that can do that, you're not getting the benefit out of those engagements that you should. You really need to encourage a super uber geeky culture in your team. This should be your team's culture. Everyone should be excited about being a security engineer. Everyone should want to backtrack VM. Everyone should want to learn what else other people are doing on the team. You need to figure out ways to make that fun. I literally did hacking contests when I was in this role. We had people do classes, and then at the end of the class do a contest. So I did that with forensics, had one forensics person. So we did a forensics lab basically, and then there's a contest. Here's a hard drive. You have 2 hours with the hard drive. Here are the things that you can find, right? It was fun. People enjoyed it. If you have someone in your team that doesn't want to have anything to do with cross-training, doesn't want to learn new skills, doesn't want to get involved in any of this fun stuff, they're just, I do firewalls and that's all I ever want to do, seriously consider replacing them with somebody that's actually exciting and about security and wants to do other things, because odds are somebody excited about security can probably learn everything that person knows pretty quickly. So you don't really need somebody who's given up. Now, like I said, you inherited something if you're in this role. So either the team pre-existed or it's a new team, but as part of building a new team, you get stuff from other teams. So the network team gives you the firewalls, maybe Windows team gives you AV, etc. You're going to be told a lot of things about what this technology does and doesn't do, what's good about it, what's bad about it. Don't believe any of it, and don't repeat any of it until you see it for yourself. So either you check it out with yourself personally, if you trust your skills in that technology, or you get somebody who you trust their skills and wasn't the one who implemented it to look over it. Because that's the only way you're not going to get blamed for it when you figure out it doesn't actually do any of the stuff that people told you that it does. And you will find some of that. So if you inherited a WAF, after you get a chance to look at it, you'll figure out, SQL injection turned off on that WAF. Or the vulnerability scanning program people talked about was so good. Yeah, a year ago, all the authentication broke on it. And the patching really isn't that good. It's just no longer an authenticated scan. You'll find these little things that people think work, and they don't. And if you were repeating what they said, you said, oh yeah, we do that. And then once you figure out you don't, then they're going to blame you for it. Instead, you're like, well, you say that you do that. I haven't had a chance to look at it myself. Let me get one of my engineers to figure this out. And then you can go, oh, actually, yeah, I inherited this, this, and this. So don't take ownership of technology until you have a chance to really look at it. Things have a tendency to go bad over time, and people don't know. Based on that, in this role, if you're going to be either buying and picking a lot of technologies. And so I want to talk about best of breed versus suite for a little bit. And the reason is because I think I have some hindsight on this, because I went best of breed. And best of breed seems really good academically. That is my favorite graphic, by the way. So I really thought it was a good idea. I thought I'll get the best products for everything, tie them all together with this awesome SIM, I'll be the most secure. But I'd never been a manager at a big company before. I didn't understand how the game was played at large companies. So if you work for a large company, there's a whole process that you have to follow to buy a new product, especially if it's a new vendor, right? And it can take months. We're talking like 6 months, 8 months. And it's specifically designed to make sure you do not get the best product. Its goal is to make sure that you follow the consistent path and that everything was evaluated the same so that whoever loses can't claim that you did something inappropriate, right? So you're almost guaranteed not to get the best product. So what a very common example is you have an RFP process, here's a template, you have to score all these RFP responses, 3/4 of which are part of the template, and you don't even care what the answer is, but they have equal weight in the score, and then you have 10 different people, and then you merge all those numeric answers together to come up with the best one, and that's the one you buy. But almost no one in the process actually agrees that that one was actually the best one, right? Because it's not a scientific process. There's no science there. They act like those numbers are scientific, but they're not. But it's a consistent process. And so the losers can't sue you. The losers can't say, well, you bought that one because your brother works for that bar. Because you have documented evidence, right? And that's the point of it, and you can't get around it. So before you go this path, I highly recommend talking to your peers, other managers that have been there for a while, and find out what the process is and how painful it is and how long it takes. Because if you have to do something like that, it's not necessarily going to be as awesome as you think it's going to be. If it's a small company, you don't have that, you have freedom, well, heck yeah, go best of breed, man, that's awesome. But if you have to follow someone else's process, it's not necessarily going to be best of breed. You're just deciding, I don't want to work with a suite vendor. You're not necessarily getting the best thing. You can avoid a lot of that pain if you go suite, because you can just convince people, if this company sells something and I need it, that's the one I'm going to buy, and I'm not going to go through that huge process. Me and my security engineers aren't going to spend 3 months, 6 months, 8 months figuring out what it is that we should buy and scoring things. We're going with them. And 9 times out of 10, if they don't have something that I need, I'll just call them up and say, who do you partner with? And there'll be one company, and that's the one we'll buy. And we still don't go through the process. The downside of this is, you know up front you're not necessarily getting the best stuff. Some of the stuff's going to be the best and some of it's not. That's kind of painful pill to swallow up front, but in hindsight, it's what you get with the other side too. So it's an interesting choice. Neither's right or wrong. It's really going to depend on your environment, the size of the company, the red tape that they put around things. But it's something to consider. It's not something that I understood really well when I took over the job. And in hindsight, the huge amount of effort, not only myself, but my security engineers put in product selection, might have been better served making products work. And we might have done a better job if we just said, we're just going to go with this big company that sells all this stuff. If I worked for a smaller company that didn't have any of that red tape, and I just had the ability to pick what I wanted, I'd probably still go down that path though. So it's really, it depends on you, depends on the company and the processes. Just something to consider. If you inherited a suite, by the way, don't just stick with it because that's what you inherited. Look at it. Some of these partners are better than others. There's some really good ones. There's some really not so good ones. I'm not going to name names. But don't just go with it because that's what you inherited or the first product you need out of the gate, they're actually really good at it. Look at the whole suite. Look at everything they offer. If they offer things that you're going to buy and it's not so good, they're not known for that, get the roadmap for that. Make sure that they're actually planning on improving it and it's not just a side product that's fleshing out their suite and they're never going to do anything with it. You know? So up front, when you first start, is pretty much your only chance to actually switch suite partners if you really want to. If you go down, if you get in bed with them for a couple of years, it's going to be really hard to switch. So hindsight is kind of painful in that case. If anyone has any questions or wants to comment, just stop me. We'll have time at the end too, but what the hell, it's a security conference. All right. Leadership. Social engineering works, by the way. Everyone successful does it. Learn a little bit about it. Anyone who approves your policies or approves your budget, just make sure they like you as a human being. You know, I'm not saying make sure that they understand everything there is about security, but if they close their eyes and picture you, they should smile. All right? It just makes everything else easier. Once you get that down, figure out what they know about security and what their opinion is on it. If it's good, and they like you, well, awesome. Your job's going to be easy. That's awesome. If they don't, which is actually pretty common, you're going to have to work on that, but that might take years because you can't just like educate them. If you come across preachy or like I know more about something than you, that normally doesn't work out so well with directors and senior directors. So you're going to have to let them come to conclusions on their own. In the meantime, you'll have to get things done, and you'll have to get things done to help them understand that security is actually valuable. What you want to do in that case is find out what does make them tick. Find out what they do understand. Everyone senior in IT has metrics that they watch monthly or quarterly, and they measure themselves on it. They measure their leaders on it. They use it to figure out, you know, how things are going. There's probably a security one on there. There might not be. If there isn't, that's something you'll be able to fix. If there is, it's probably garbage. It's probably something like percentage of desktops that have valid AV signatures on them. Nothing all that useful. So that's not going to help you sell like a border security project, for example. So say your border security needs some work and no one really gets it and no one wants to fund it. Find out what they pay attention to. Maybe one of the statistics that they watch, maybe one of the top 10 statistics that they watch is percentage of uptime of customer-facing websites. It's actually kind of a common one if you have customer-facing websites. Perfect. Dig into that. Find out who keeps that statistic. Find out who measures it. Get the data on it. If you're lucky, there'll be a couple of instances in the last couple of years, a DOS attack, outage, or some other security event outage. And then you have a case. Then you can say, well, based on my research, I think these attacks are going to increase over time, and this statistic's at risk. If I don't do this project to lock some of these things down and get some DOS protection, and oh yeah, this other protection that we need too that you don't care about, but it all comes in the same products, and so yay, can I get funded? Or your statistic's going to go yellow, and that's 1/10 of your bonus, and you don't want that to go yellow. That's how you get funded. Eventually you'll get them to have real security metrics. We'll talk about that later. But up front, that can be very effective if you can make the right tie-ins. That one's an easy one. Sometimes you have to get really creative. So odds are, if you just took over a team, pretty soon after you took over a team, you'll realize that nothing's ever been written down, ever. Just almost 100% guaranteed, unless you work for very specific industries. So don't freak out about it. If you do freak out about it and you cool everyone in the air and go, okay, we've got to write all this stuff down, you'll literally get eye-rolling and moaning, groaning, and literally just like, oh, God, no, I don't want to write that down. And for new employees to do that to their boss is like serious. That means they really seriously don't want to write that down, because you're the fourth new boss to come in and say, holy crap, we can write everything down. They know they're never going to read it. They know none of their peers are ever going to read it. The person who writes it is never going to reference it, and the other people on the team are never going to read it. They're just going to call the guy who wrote it. And if they can't get a hold of them, they'll just suffer through it because they'll forget that you wrote it in the first place. So instead, don't be that guy. Instead, what you want to do is just pull them together and say, okay, someday something bad's going to happen. And it's going to be made worse because we didn't know something. Because whoever's on call or whoever's available just didn't have some piece of information, and it was worse. It was a longer outage where the breach was worse, or we couldn't give the executive some piece of nugget information that would make them feel better, whatever. Let's figure out what all those things are. Get those written down. Get those someplace where we can find them easily and keep them up to date. Wiki, SharePoint site, if your company is in SharePoint, just a folder share that's formatted in a way that you can find stuff, and then move on. Because if you don't, when that bad thing happens, and then it comes out that, well, this outage was twice as long as it should have been because the security team didn't know what they were doing, you will be made to document everything. And it will be painful, and it won't be your decision anymore. So that's a much better approach. Let everything else slide. There's plenty to do. Trust me, there's plenty to do. All right. Holy crap, I'm talking fast. This took way longer in practice. I might be nervous. All right. This is extra important for engineers who want to be managers. It's really important for managers too, but pay extra attention to this if you ever want to this job someday and you work for this person. Now, the top bullet here, that's the one I came up with. Every company's org structure is a little different. It might be named different. There might be one of these might be missing. There might be a couple extra ones in your organization. But this is a pretty general good list of not just teams, but specifically the leaders of those teams that are very important to you. If the leaders of those teams hate you, you're going to get fired. It might take 2 years, but you will get fired eventually because people hate conflict at the manager level. It is a country club. You can get blackballed. You can get kicked back to the public course. Welcome to management. All right? So if their entire team hates you, the manager is going to hate you because you're making their job more difficult. All right? So the flip side is if they fight for something for you, if they're really going after, like, man, we really need X, you know, where my entire architecture diagrams don't work anymore, if you don't give this guy over here this thing, well, you're probably going to get it. So they can also really help you. If you're a security engineer trying to become a manager and these people don't like you, you're probably not going to get that promotion. If you do get the promotion, well, now you're going to get fired because these people hate you, so that kind of sucks. So, if these people like you, make sure they stay liking you, right? If you screwed up this relationship, any of these, so if you screw up multiple of the relationships, you're kind of in trouble already. There's not much I can do for you. If you screw one of them up, focus on fixing it like it's one of your highest priorities and never give up. Talk to your boss about it. Make sure your boss knows about it. Go to your boss and say, hey, the head of audit hates me. I might have called her ugly in the meeting. I don't know, but she hates me and I need to fix it. Get advice on how to fix it. Make sure that that person knows what's going on. Schedule a meeting with whoever it is that doesn't like you. Tell them how sorry you are for whatever the heck it is that you did and that you feel bad about it. You want to fix it and fall on your sword for them. It may or may not work. If it works, great. Don't screw the relationship up again. You'll never fix it a second time. If it doesn't work, keep at it and just keep doing it. Keep trying to fix the relationship and make sure your boss knows that you're still trying to do it, even if it's obvious that it's never going to work. Even if you hate the person and you don't want to be friends with the person, just keep doing it. Because someday, senior leaders, maybe 2 levels above you, is going to get sick of hearing about the fact that these 2 people don't work well together, and they're going to decide to fire one of you. It's just going to happen. And if you worked nonstop for a year trying to make the relationship good, and that person just kept screwing you, and your boss knows about it, maybe they'll decide to fire that person instead of you, because you made them look like the jerk and the unprofessional one. Right? Maybe. It's not a guarantee. So, but it's your only shot, to be honest, if you can't fix the relationship. If you, like I said, if you're an engineer, don't let these relationships sour. And it's actually easier as an engineer to fix them. They're much more willing to give you a second chance as an engineer. So fix them before you get promoted. Sir, you have a question?
So how do you mentioned social engineering and keeping the relationship good, but one of the things that I've seen is they're going to want to shape your opinion and your actions by a pyramid method. So how do you keep them from manipulating you by basically getting them to pass it? How do you keep sucking up to them without, failing?
Good question. So he's basically saying, how do you make them happy with you by not, in essence, pacifying them, I assume, because you still have to do your job as a security leader and basically tell them, no, you can't do that, that's insane, that's stupid, right? So, excellent question. Thank you for the question. So you have to say no to these people occasionally. And, if you say no to them enough and in a way that upsets them, eventually they'll hate you, and then you're done, So that's where the social engineering comes in. So you basically, first and foremost, you never use the word no, ever, with them, right? Just take that word out of your vocabulary. So they'll come to you with something completely insane. They'll be like, okay, look. And then they might not even come to you. They might just send you the email. They want you to click an approve button or something. And there's like, oh, look, hey, I want to open up 1433 to the SQL database directly to the internet to give our customers more access to the data and just use one generic username and password, and this is great, and it's going to save tons of time, and they're going to love it. They're like, oh, awesome. Don't tell them no. Definitely don't shoot them down in front of other people, and don't do it in an email. You go talk to them. You go talk to them in private. You say, help me understand what you're trying to do here. Okay, I'm trying to get customers to access data. Great. Say, great. I'm with you. That's a good idea. I like the idea of getting customers access to data and making it easier for them. I'm behind you on that. I'm a little concerned that the approach you've chosen might not pass an audit or a pen test, and it might be outside the bounds of some of our core security policies. And ultimately, that will turn out to be bad for us because we'll have to back it out, and that will be extra bad for customers because they'll be used to it at that point. Can I help you? Can I work with you and help you figure out how to achieve those goals in a way that will pass an audit so we can keep it open and we won't have to turn it off later? Now you're helping them, right? And you never said no. The word no never came out of your mouth, but you never actually let them do that crazy thing that they want to do. You still have to be the security manager. So it is difficult, and it's a fine line, and it's especially difficult as a security engineer first joining into this role, because your instinct is to tell them that they're completely insane and let me school you in how computers work and how idiotic that is. And they don't care, and it's just going to upset them. And they've been managing teams for 20 years, and you're this new upstart, and I'm going to get you fired and replaced with someone older. I don't like you, right? So that's what I'm talking about. That's what you have to do. And you always have to do that. And if you slip up once, you'll be going through the process that I just explained, hoping that you can fix the relationship. We good? Hold on. This guy's got a call. Give me a second. All right. So keep your team happy. So if you do run into some problems, say, for example, like in the previous example, maybe some people don't like you and you run into some rough time. If your team is successful and they love you, it's really hard to get rid of you. I mean, they still can. It's just harder. It really gives you some coverage, and it actually gives you some leverage to be able to do some stuff from a security point of view. They can't be lazy and happy. You can't make them happy because you just don't make them work. They have to be good, they have to be doing things, and they have to really love you. So first and foremost, get them funded. So a bored security team is unhappy. So you get the money and create what I like to refer to as a shit umbrella and keep them out of the political realm. Keep them shielded from the kinds of conversations I was just talking about, because it drives most security engineers completely insane to be in one of those conversations, right? And give them things to do and help them see how they're pushing security forward, and they're going to be happy. You also need to hold your people accountable, and you have to figure out when someone's really not making it. So remember earlier on in the talk, which should have been a half hour ago, but it was like 5 minutes ago, I talked about how the people are your most important asset. They need to be geeks. You need to create a culture of basically we are super smart computer people. If someone's not fitting into that and they're not really making it, whether you hired them or not, maybe you did a bad hire, or maybe you inherited someone that's not quite really living up to what everyone else in the team is, you're going to have to eventually get them out of the team. Leaving them in the team year after year drags everything down. It's painful and difficult, but you have to do it. And your team will love you for it, ultimately, right? So, because if you have all good, strong technical people that are pulling their weight, and you're getting things done, you're going to have a happy team. And like I said, it's much harder it's really actually quite easy to fire a manager that someone doesn't like and their team really isn't a big fan of them. You're just toast. You're done. You're gone at that point. This might be the most interesting one. And some people might not agree with it, and I'm cool with that. But you're protecting your border from an actual technical security thing is actually your most important thing you got to do as far as keeping your jobs concerned. And assuming you're the right person for the job, that actually makes this even more important than you would think. Yes, insider threats are real. Yes, they happen. Yes, they are more devastating when they do happen. There's all these statistics out there about insider threats. But when that happens, odds are you're not going to get fired. First off, they normally, if you can figure out who did it, well then that person's getting fired. Scapegoat, right there. They don't need to fire a second person, they just need to fire the person who did it. You're also less likely to be really held accountable if a trusted insider did something bad. That's normally not seen as the most cardinal sin. But if someone from the internet does something evil on your network, well, that's seen as unforgivable often. And how did you possibly let that happen? And there's no one else to fire. You can't fire the person on the internet. So it's going to be you. Even if they say they won't fire you, they will fire you actually at the end of the incident. They'll let you manage the incident to completion and work all night, work all weekend, and then they'll fire you. And it'll happen every time. You need to protect your border like your job depends on it, because your job depends on it. So defense in depth, do good vulnerability scanning, scan every IP that could possibly respond, not the ones you know should respond. So you catch the things that just pop up outside of the normal processes. Do good pen testing. And protect things as best as you can for your environment. And it's going to depend on what it is. Get a WAF if you need to, IPS, XML firewall. Make sure you're patching. Make sure the code's good. Literally, your job depends on it. Make sure it's hardened. Now, if you find something, say you do good vulnerability scanning, and you find a SQL injection attack, for example, not that those are common or anything, and it's bad. You can still admin hashes out of it. I mean, it's a non-trivial SQL injection attack. Okay, you go to the developers, the developer team, say, well, you gotta fix this. If they won't, and you can't get leadership on your side on this, and it could be a lot of different reasons. We're busy, we're gonna replace that site in a couple of years anyway. It's old, no one knows how to do it. That site's so critical and so confusing to our developers that it's on their code freeze. We're not allowed to touch it. All right, fine. Your job still depends on it, so put a WAF there. Now, okay, I'm going to fix it my way then. Don't have developer support, I'll throw a WAF in front of it. If you're told no, for whatever reason, no budget, or we don't like WAF, so WAF broke the site, like before you joined the company, and we're not going to let you do a WAF, or, oh, I don't know, we don't have the ability to do a full regression test of that site with a WAF, and it's really critical, and so no, we're not going to let you alter it. Your instinct as a security professional is to write that all down as a risk, get the most senior person humanly possible to sign off on it, and then frame that, put it on your wall, and wait, right? You think what will happen is when that gets a hit, then all of a sudden first off, you'll have to manage an incident, and then after that, they'll start listening to you, and then you'll get budget, and you'll be able to fix things. What happens is after it gets hit, is they'll fire you. And the reason is if you find something like that, and then under no circumstances are you allowed to fix it, you're not a manager, right? Your job's to be fired when something bad happens. All right? So seriously, that is a pretty extreme example, but it's a real one. And if you work for a company that has a problem, especially on their border, and they will not, under any circumstances, let you do anything to make it not a vulnerability anymore, your job's to get fired when something bad happens. Don't work there anymore. If you're here at Derbicon, or if you're watching on the internet, you're a member of this community and aware enough to not work at a company like this. Get out of there and tell everyone you know not to work there. Don't let any good security person work at that company. Don't let people you know be scapegoats, because that's what you are if you're not allowed to fix it. On a side note, if something bad's happened, it doesn't have to be a breach from the internet. If maybe an audit went bad this time and it was better last time, or something else happened that you kind of predicted was going to happen and you covered your ass about it and you have all this documentation, and you start letting people know about that, and you start emailing it and bringing it up in meetings, and your boss pulls you aside and says, yeah, don't send that in email anymore, or don't talk to the auditor, don't talk to that director, don't just, I'll take care of it. You're already fired, actually. They brought in Operation Scapegoat. Whatever that bad thing was enough that they pulled the trigger on that. You have maybe 2-3 weeks. You're gone. So stop working and just look for a job. It's already over.
How many times have you been fired?
So it's not all my personal experiences. But I do know people that have been in this job or are in this job. So some of them are from there as well. Yes, sir.
One comment, one question. You're talking about the insider stuff. You're absolutely correct. It's less important if the insider does it. A lot of times it's not even an incident that happens, it will be covered up. Because we don't have people that were trusted by other people who are important do bad things, because that was the whole thing. So we'll whitewash it, and it will be not as bad, and it's not your problem, it's worth better. So you're correct in that. The second question is, you mentioned that if you've got somebody who's not performing, or blah blah, you gotta get rid of them. In movies, you walk up to HR, you put their box, you want responsibility. In most big companies, there's a lot more people involved. Can you talk about ways in which you found it worked to create people like that?
All right. So the comment was he agreed with me on the insider threat, not getting you fired, and the outside threat, getting you fired. And the question was, I mentioned, if you have someone not cutting it, you have to get rid of them as part of keeping your team happy. And in the real world, that's a lot more painful. You can't just go, you're fired. And wants to know ways I've actually successfully done that. Excellent question. I think a good example is one of the more painful ones I had. Took months on end, actually. Killed my team for a little bit there to help me do it. Basically, what you can do, especially if you inherited somebody, been there for a long time, that's when it's the worst, right? So if they're really new, the paperwork's pretty minor typically. If they've been with the company for a decade or so, the paperwork's much more extreme. And also it's going to scale with the size of the organization as well. One, your job descriptions for your engineers have to be solid and have to be real. So if you inherited garbage job descriptions, fix them. And that's going to be a process by itself, but fix those. So once you have those fixed, then you rate that person based on the real job description and show all the areas that they can't actually fulfill the job. And you give them a performance improvement plan. It can up to 3 months. Depends on HR. HR will actually tell you how long you have to give them and improve the plan to be able to demonstrate that they can actually do the job or not. And then, as part of that plan, what I did is I actually did some of the things like the hacking contest, like the contest after training, to demonstrate that everybody else on the team can do something, and then this person actually can't. Because then it's fair, because everyone on the team is actually doing it. So we did like, a forensics class, a web app pen test class, with then a contest afterwards. Here's a vulnerable website, basically, that you log into with your ID, and there's 12 things that you can get. Here's 12 basically contests in essence, and go through and get them. And one person couldn't get any of them, and everyone else got all but one of them, right? And then that's data points for a performance plan that you can use to then say, okay, and maybe it's the role changed, but as a corporate, in corporate America anyway, roles are allowed to change, and if you can't adjust quickly enough, well then that's grounds for termination. Also, if they're qualified to do something else in the company, get them on another team. You don't always have to fire people. So if they're a really good Windows admin and they're just not cutting it on your team, try to get them on the Windows team, right? You'll end up with an ally over there anyway, and it's better for everybody. So, and then there's a lot less paperwork involved if you can just sneak them onto another team. So, but only if they're going to be successful. The other team don't screw your peer, because it's not going to help you.
Can't you just try and get them promoted too?
Not as a manager of engineers. That's more of a senior manager director technique. He said, couldn't you just get him promoted? So, yeah. Good? All right. So, taking to the next level. So let's assume you assess the situation, you have your people and technology under control, people don't hate you, your team is happy, and your border is protected. So now you're going to be there for a while. Now what the hell do you do? Remember earlier I talked about don't say no to people? Beat that into your team's head. First off, it will help any of them that wants your job someday, right? To my point earlier. Second off, if you make your team enablers, if you tell them, don't ever tell people no, they can't do it. Instead say, well, let me help you do that in a secure way that's actually going to pass it on, that we can approve, that kind of thing. If you change that vocabulary and change their attitude, it will go a long way in helping not only your team, but also, go back to the point earlier, it will actually help you ultimately, because then that team's not going to hate your team. And if their team hates your team, well then that boss is ultimately going to hate you because you're making their job difficult. So, if you follow my advice on the people part, you're going to have some of the geekiest people in the company, right? Occasionally there's going to be a really hard problem in production. It has nothing to do with security. Let your team help them figure it out, right? It gets you a lot of bonus points with your peers, which can be helpful, right? And a lot of times it can actually be good training from a security point of view. An example is, a lot of the harder problems are a performance issue in the production environment that you can't reproduce anywhere else, right? Those happen all the time. They're the biggest pain in the butt. The easiest way to pinpoint where you should look is to take packet captures from certain key ports of the network, look at them in Wireshark, know what you're looking at in Wireshark, and be able to figure out where the delay's coming from and narrow it down. Very few teams across your infrastructure department will know how to do that, right? Let your security engineers do that. It's excellent training from a security point of view, right? It's actually a cool thing to do. And if they don't know how to get to those packet captures from key points and things like that, well then, great. They need to know how to do that anyway. What happens if you really have an incident, right? So, lend out their expertise occasionally, right? It goes a long way. So, I said this earlier, but get your team funded is a big deal. It's one of your bigger part of your jobs, basically, as a security manager. The first year, if you're not on top of it, here's what's going to happen. Your boss is going to come to you on a Tuesday around 3 and say, yeah, the first draft of the budget for next year is due Friday. Which means I need to get to my boss Thursday, which means I need all my managers to get me their draft budgets tomorrow. I've been meaning to tell you all week, sorry it's almost the end of the day Tuesday, just get me something before 9 a.m. tomorrow, don't worry, it's the first draft. But that's going to be your only input into the budget that year, and all your stuff's going to get cut. So don't let that happen. In January, assuming you're on the annual fiscal calendar, find out when in general, and your boss might not tell you, so ask your peers, what month is the budget normally done for next year? It's way earlier than you anticipate. A lot of times it's July, right? Which is crazy because you don't even know what you're going to finish yet for this year, but whatever, corporate America is what it is. So if it's in July, in June, your team meetings with your engineers should all be about next year's budget and the roadmap. What are we really going to likely accomplish this year? What are we going to do next year? What do we want to buy? Call up the VARs, get real quotes for things, justify it, come up with a plan, just have it sitting there. So that Tuesday afternoon, he's like, yeah, I need your stuff in like an hour. You have it. Here you go. You'll actually get a project or two. If you start with a really small budget, build successes with free things, and if you build successes with free things, towards the end of the year, have some kind of like shovel-ready projects ready to go that you can accomplish pretty quickly, because a lot of teams won't spend the money that they actually allotted for themselves. And become known as the team that if you have money left over, you should go talk to the security team because they'll actually make use of it. The amount of money I got from other teams not spending their money in the third and fourth quarter of the year was more money than I ever got up front for 5 years. Because I got known as somebody who actually will accomplish something with the money you give them. But I couldn't get the really senior bigwigs to actually approve most of it up front. But about October, when there's $1 million of server upgrades and they've only spent $200,000, and it becomes obvious that you can't physically upgrade that many servers for the rest of the year, suddenly some of that money frees up. It's like, hey, I can, I don't know, I can get IPS implemented in a couple weeks if you just want to give me some money. It works really well, and then you get a couple of those successes, and then the regular budget process goes a little better too. All right, now back to leadership. Remember I said that they either have no security metrics, or they probably have really bad ones, like percentage of AV signatures that are valid or current or whatever. Most IT leadership is very metrics driven. So you want your metrics on their list of things they pay attention to, and you want it to mean something. So make something that's measurable, that they can measure with a number or a percentage. So here's one example. You don't have to use anything remotely like this. You can come up with whatever you want, but do something like this. Get your stuff on their list, right? So one thing you can do, come up with some number of things. So let's just say there's 8 things that we do, right? And here's a maturity model. And if 7 of those things were basically on the low end, which I'll call 1. Remember, it has to be a number right? Because they take numbers and make them into colors, and it works. It's just, trust me. So, and if some of these things are a 1 on a scale from 1 to 5 from a maturity point of view, one of them's a 2, and map it out and go, okay, here's, AV signature based all the way to holy crap APT production, and here's a couple points in the middle, patch management to like super awesome vulnerability management. Maybe the last one is some kind of proactive protection, whatever. You're the manager, use your engineers, come up with what makes sense for your environment, and then you get that bubbled up to, something that they can buy into. Show them the metrics, show them the graph, show them everything. Get them to go, yeah, that looks good. That's where we're at. That's where we should be. I agree with you. Then you can set goals, which not only are your goals, but they're their goals. They can say, okay, well, we want by the end of next year, 80% of these things to be what we call on the mature, like maybe it's a 4, right? Now you have a number. Now you have a percentage. Now you have something they can track. Then 6 months from now, you should be tracking to 80%, and you're still at 40%. And that's going to upset that manager, because now all of a sudden he has something, some director, he has all these green things, now there's a yellow one. This isn't tracking right. They're going to come to you and say, well, why isn't this happening? You're like, well, I need money and resources to be able to do this, right? I had projects proposed for every single one of these things to go from 1 to 2 to 3, and you cut all but one of them in your budget process. So either we need to readjust the goals, or you need to give me some more money, right? Maybe more headcount, maybe more consulting dollars, right? No one likes readjusting their goals. Once they set that stuff, it's pretty much set. Suddenly the pocketbook opens up a little bit. Suddenly you get some consultants. Suddenly maybe you get a headcount out of the deal. So that's what I mean by getting some statistics on their plate that actually matter to you, so they can tell, well, look, if we're not advancing security, they can tell in a way that makes sense to them, which has to be a number that they can then make a red, yellow, green dot. It's just the way it is. All right? So that's all I had. So I love the questions so far. The questions have all been really good. I also like opinions. You know, even if they're different than mine, this is open forum in my opinion. Everyone here is equal. So you're not helping anybody, keeping anything to yourself, whether it's a question or an opinion. So we have like 2 whole freaking minutes, maybe 5.
So
I'm gonna go to this, so I need to keep my CSSP, so I'm gonna put that in the background while we're talking.
So I've seen, you said about free software, to help you out, but I've seen that backfire where the next year they go, well, you got all that accomplished with free software, you don't need to buy anything else.
Okay, so the question was using free software can backfire because you can just say you don't need to use anything else. No, 100% sure, because I haven't gone to Boris's talk tomorrow. According to him, it sounds like you can just do everything for free. But yeah, that can backfire sometimes, but it's all about perception setting, and it's all about picking the right things. So if you really want to get like an awesome IPS, spending a huge amount of time forcing Snort to do what you want it to do is probably not the right thing that you should do if you're trying to build a success and to get some budget. So it's about picking the right thing sometimes and knowing when the free version of something is actually worthwhile and to a certain degree your sales skills. Yeah, in the back, I saw you first.
How do you deal with the 80/20 rule? Like, for example, you price out say a sim, you know it's going to cost $100,000. They say, well, we'll give you $80,000. How do you deal with that scenario? Because do you ask for 120 knowing that they're going to cut it? Do you move to 100, then you get what you want? Or how do you deal with that scenario? Because I know it's very common.
All right, so the question was, how do you deal with the budgetary problem of you budget $100,000 for a product because that's what it's going to cost, and they say, well, we'll give you $80K. So, yeah.
You pad it up front.
Yeah. So okay. So you have people saying pad it. Padding is definitely a valid approach. But you gotta be careful too, because after a couple of years, let's just assume you're gonna be in this job for a while. They'll get used to you padding it, and then now you have to start padding your pad. And then once you start padding your pad, then things start getting so crazy expensive they just start cutting it. So it's a really dangerous path to go down. So a couple different other things you can do is, if you're known for actually giving decent quotes, right, it will happen less often. Where you can save some money sometimes is throw in consulting dollars and labor costs into it, and get them to cut that, and training dollars, right? Throw extras in there that aren't the core and use that to get cut, right? And then the last one is beat the crap out of your VAR and make them give it to you for 80, right? That's your job, right? That's why they're cutting it. They're cutting it because they want you to go pimp out there and get it for 80, and that is actually your job. You.
Do you have any suggestions for maintaining the balance between crazy smart security geek and egotistical ass?
Okay, that's another excellent question. You guys are awesome.
In a positive way.
Yes, I've been mostly positive. So the question was, how do you balance out hardcore geek versus egotistical ass and security geek? So security people are odd. And it's in a very interesting way because they're mostly introverted and opinionated simultaneously, which is a bizarre-ass mix. And if you get the wrong mix of people on your team, it can be a disaster. So the best approach really is to build a really good cohesive team environment. So things I did is no one had individual goals. Everyone's goal was a team goal. Even if only one person was working on a project and that project was to be completed successfully was a goal for the team, everyone got rated on it. And so if that person failed, everyone gets less money, right? So everyone had shared goals. Everyone was encouraged to help everyone else. Basically, you're all in this together, and you better all help each other, or you're going to make less money. Because ultimately that's the biggest stick you have, frankly. If you build basically like a family type environment, then what happens is the same thing that happens in most functional families, is that you learn the weird personality problems that everyone has, and security is not the only one that has this problem. Pretty much every team has this problem, and you figure out ways around it, and you become completely functional with that person right? And then they help each other. And then when they see that person like screaming at a DBA like a psychopath, they like come over and go, hey, you know, come, you know, he's hungry. Just don't worry about it. He's hungry, and let me talk to you. And they help each other with that stuff. So it's really about, and it takes extra time. The other thing with this job is it takes more than 40 hours to do this job, which is why it's hard to maintain your technical skills, because you're going to be busy not maintaining your technical skills. I did barbecues at my house with the team, take them out to beers, you take them out go-kart racing, whatever is culturally appropriate for that team in whatever region you're in or whatever they're into. You have to build a team. That's the best way around it. Sir, I'm going to go until you kick me out, by the way.
Can't go anywhere.
Would you have fear for losing your technical skills because you're not, you know, you don't have the time now to really be technical? You have to be like this evangelist now?
Okay, yeah. So the question was about, do I fear losing my technical skills? To a certain degree, I did a little bit. I was able to get them back pretty quick. And the fact that I'm no longer in this job, and the fact that, you know, I know so many people who have either needed to find another job quickly or suddenly decided, you know, because you're at a bigger whim of people's personal opinions and leadership changes than an engineer is, you might just want to change jobs pretty quickly. And there's much less manager jobs out there than engineering jobs. And there's so many people who have allowed their technical skills to atrophy that that's the only job they can go after, and so they're willing to do it for less money than you because they need a freaking job. So yes, it's a problem and it's a fear, but it's a downside of having this job. You have to put that time in it. If you don't, you're putting yourself and your family at risk, basically. And frankly, it makes you a better boss. If you can do some of that stuff, then you're calling BS based on knowledge, not how strongly you seem to have that opinion, which is good because scary people are opinionated even if they're wrong. So you kind of need some technical skills to do this job right. I'll get you next. What?
Engineers tend to have very strong routines and see things and yes, no. Kick it over to the second hand. Sales engineers will never tell you no and sell lines things that don't exist. How do you train engineers who are like sales before we get those soft skills? Is there value in something to a soft skills training class, or can you mentor, or is just not enough ratio to them to do mentoring? How do you get nerds to be salespeople?
Okay, so the question is, how do you get your nerds in your team to be good salespeople like SEs? I don't know if I ever did. I think there's a certain amount of diminishing returns there. I did go after the thing I talked about, which was don't say no. You know, make sure you see yourself and make sure they see you as enablers of how to do things securely as opposed to stopping people from doing things. And one of the key things you have to realize is that when people come and ask you, can I do this? They're really not asking permission. It comes across like they're asking permission, but they're going to do it if you say no anyway in most cases. They'll find a way around you, right? And so you really want to help them do it securely because they're really asking, will you help me do this, not can I? Other than that, I don't think I really did. I let them focus on technical skills, and that's where I was the umbrella. And if that was really necessary, that's where I stepped in, basically, and tried to shield them from that while they did something more interesting. That's part of keeping your team happy. And I'm done, so I'm going to go outside, and if you got anyone who wants to continue the conversation, I'm here. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Nice work. Yeah, I'm going through that now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What's your name again?